On this episode of Growth and Diversity Podcast, hear from Jeff Shi, founder of InsurTech Group, and Miguel Edwards, a former CIO and founder of 5M Consulting, and me, Shawn Davis of Brown Davis Executive Search, on elevating the topic of workforce diversity in the insurance industry. Gentlemen, thanks for joining me this morning. How's everyone doing?
Awesome.
Great.
So we've got a fiery topic for today, I think generated from an article that kind of swarmed the internet. And the three of us, I guess we'll call ourselves the three amigos today, decided let's dive deep on this onto a podcast. So before we do that and have some fun discussions that hopefully will, I think, the purpose of this podcast, right, elevating that discussion of diversity in the insurance industry and opening it up, is really seeing what we can do to help start that conversation in insurance companies, also with talent and those things. Jeff, if you don't mind, just give the audience, a little bit of story about your background.
Sure. I have been a serial entrepreneur for the past 20 plus years. Started 7 companies and have been in the insurance industry for 13 years. Have some small mom and pop company from 1 to 5 people, and 2 of the biggest company I had over 150 and 177, and both of them were bootstrapped, and we grew from organically within a year, 2 years. So have built a little bit of everything, and
then main focus in the insurance side, product line, market. What's that look like?
general agency. So your
PNC,
traditional mom and pop, auto, home, commercial, but we just did it a little bit differently, right? We just did it at scale, and it just gets good at one thing. We do one thing over and over again, 10,000 hours, 10,000 days,
Love it.
and then just try to scale one at a time.
Very cool. And Jeff is constantly featured as, I don't know if this is the right term, Jeff, an InsurTech influencer on the list. And so congrats to you to staying on top of that list. And I think you climb almost every single time I see it. So you put out some great stuff out there. So great job on that.
Thank you. It's a cool list to be on. I don't know how they get the criteria to be on that list, but
yeah,
it's
put
cool
a word
to
in
be
for
on.
a guy, man. Try to help me out here. I was going to ask you, like, who do you know? What are you doing? I think a lot of it goes to your work ethic and your networking ability. So nice, kudos for you. And plus, you have a really cool company name, InsurTech Group. Kind of nailed that one. So good job there.
Yeah.
Miguel.
Easy search word.
Miguel, give us a little introduction on your background. Really fascinating background.
Thanks, Shawn. No, absolutely. So, I get Jeff, serial entrepreneur. I guess I spent the past 25 years of my career up until 6 months ago as a corporate Joe. And so I've been in the corporate arena for the entirety of my career. And the past 20 years or so have been in the insurance industry. I've worked on the broker side, big carrier side, solution provider side. I've been on the PNC, life and health, done nearly every line of business that there is under the sun, and also to a mix of operations, business, and technology, kind of in every other role type of thing. Last 6 years, I've been a life and health carrier CIO. And then most recently founded my own consulting shop here, thinking I could put some of what I have learned to use. And I specifically target smaller companies, call it like the 1 to 5 to 600 million range, that could potentially use some of the best practices that I've learned from the bigger shops that I've been in, the big global national insurers, et cetera, to bring some of that goodness, some of that big four consulting style that I also learned working with all of the big four consultants, bring that down market to smaller carriers that, to be honest with you, are likely going to be really, really critical to the future of the insurance industry. I think we're going to start seeing a lot of innovation come out of those guys. They actually have a lot more flexibility. They're easier to turn, and especially so also as well, they're learning a lot of cool tricks from the big boys with plays like this. So excited to have this conversation.
I want to thank you for that. Very, very impressive. I also saw you're a adjunct faculty member. And I think it's really interesting from my side when I go back to my prior 16 years on the corporate side as well, before jumping into the, I guess, business ownership and entrepreneurship, is you've got real world experience, knowledge, right? First, and then flip it over here, versus these are thoughts, ideas, theories, and I'm going to ask you guys to test them for me. You've been there, you've done that, you've made millions of dollars of mistakes, and you've also done $1 million, maybe even billions of successful initiatives. And so I think, so, bringing on someone like you, this is not an ad for Miguel. We're just getting to know each other, but
Yeah.
I love the background and the
Yeah.
track record, and then the value that I think someone like you in the firm that you're building can bring to an organization with that history. So kudos to you.
No, I appreciate that, Shawn. And just real quick, because you did mention, my work in academia, which I'm still extremely involved in. Matter of fact, I just got back from facilitating a 3-day session in innovation.
Hmm.
But one of the things that has been really fascinating for me on that journey is that I've been learning academic frameworks that kind of on their own, without testing them in the real world, are fairly useless.
Yeah.
And then so I've taken those academic frameworks that I've been learning because I have to teach them,
Yep.
then applying them into the real world, and then seeing what works and what doesn't work. And then so then what I end up with is this amazing confluence of academic research, real world practical application, and then I bring that together, and that's kind of what I'm sharing with my clients now.
Oh, I think that's
So
great.
yeah,
No, that's awesome. Well, perfect. Let's jump into the topic today. So,
yeah.
there was an article that I think I even shared it, and I think the header of it was "Attacks on DEI Spreading in the Corporate World." Was really interesting. Anytime you can mention, I think in an article, I don't know if it's clickbait or not, but they were quoted. So Elon Musk, Mark Cuban, Bill Ackman, there were some big names in there, and it was around this whole idea of DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion. And then I think what's interesting for me when I think about that is it's a common sense idea, thought, or term that was not common practice. So then they had to build a label and something for it, right, to then drive that initiative forward. And now it seems like, which is exactly what I think organizations and companies should be doing. And you tend to have to do those things when something's not common sense or in common practice. And now there's a little bit of backlash, it seems like, coming in from that side. So I want to start with, that's kind of the framework of today. The almost the reverse, I think someone was quoted as calling these initiatives reverse racism. Wow. Like, let's just throw that on the table right there. But I'm going to pull you back in just a second, and I would love for you guys to talk about a little bit just your definition of diversity. What does that mean? Being diverse yourself, your careers, you as humans, all those things. So just set the stage a little bit for diversity. What does that mean to you? Jeff, I'll start with you.
That's a good one. So, diversity is a sensitive subject, right? And
100%.
DEI is a sensitive subject. ESG is a sensitive subject. I mean, it doesn't matter where we go on this subject, we're gonna step on landmines. So for all your audience out there, forgive us. Don't shoot the messenger. Just
Right.
get that out of the way. I'm a Asian American, right, and immigrant at that too, right. So diversity is something that I celebrate because I think I personally selfishly can gain from, right. But if you see some of the things that come out of Harvard and some of the big schools, how they treat admissions for diversity on Asian students, we have been on the loser end of that acceptance, right? So you have big schools, big college with so much pressure to their applications on bringing more diversity of brown and black, and just happened that a lot of time these Asian students, whether coming from overseas or second generation, third generation, grew up here, they excel really, really well at these academics, and they have been on the loser end in these applications when they trying to get into schools compared to their peers who are brown and black, with higher expectation to get into these schools like Harvard, right? So as a kid growing up, that has something that I have known is working against me, that we have to work harder to achieve the same application results. So let's just get that out of the way.
Mm-hmm.
That's like something that I grew up with, right?
Yep.
Let's go into diversity in our industry. All of us are in insurance, right? Let's ask the question: do we have diversity in colors, and do we have diversity in gender? Where is the diversity excelling in? Is it in the agent channel? Is it in the corporate channel? Is it in the actuary? Is it in the claims? I don't think we have it. I think the last 10 years, the big corporate have been really making a stride and effort, try to go there, try to make the diversity happen. And a lot of people are saying we don't achieve diversity because our selections I think we need to think outside the box and think harder. I think we don't achieve diversity because our industry is just not sexy.
Hmm.
Mm.
So, well, all the industry out there, IT, SaaS, AI, cyber, trying to achieve diversity, they just offer more sexiness of attraction to the industry than we are. So that's one of my view that I think is not getting talked about, right?
Yeah.
So Miguel, I'm sure you have plenty of views on this.
Yeah, so look, I think there's two ways to answer this question around what is diversity. I think there's a way that you talk about it from a social justice perspective. And then I think the piece that I want to talk about, because at the end of the day, we're on LinkedIn, we're talking about the insurance industry.
Yep.
It's the capitalist component of it.
Yep.
And those are two very different discussions. But I think interestingly enough, the people who are commenting that you just mentioned against DEI, you would argue that they're capitalists, would you not? And so
100%.
if you take that as the kind of the dynamic that we're going to evaluate, the purpose of diversity is to be able to most appropriately meet the needs of your market. That to me is the pure
100%.
capitalist definition and need for diversity. And so if I'm working at a national insurer and I look at the buying demographic of insurance, it is a diverse market, especially when you double click on certain areas.
Yep.
So it would only
Right.
stand to reason that I could better serve the diversity of that market if the people in home office, if the people in the agency force
Yep.
look like the people I'm trying to serve. And I think if you look at every statistic that has ever been analyzed around the performance of companies that are diverse versus the ones that are not, you find from a pure economic standpoint that diversity makes you more money and it makes you more profitable. I think we see that time and time again.
Yep.
And so, Jeff, I mean, imagine me going into an Asian American market trying to sell insurance. It wouldn't play. It wouldn't play, right? So we need to be able to match what our markets need. And I think that that's where we go awry and we start we start thinking about diversity as kind of like these things where, reverse racism. By the way, Shawn, real quick, I pulled up the definition of racism
Yeah.
because I figured this was going to come up. Let me just read what I have here
Perfect.
on my screen. Okay. That comes from the Oxford Dictionary. It says racism: prejudice, discrimination, or antagonism by an individual, community, or institution against a person or people on the basis of their membership in a particular racial or ethnic group, typically one that is a minority or marginalized. So, Bill, I'm sorry, dude. I don't know that you are marginalized or a minority. I'd say the same to Elon. Okay.
Right.
So at the end of the day, we've got to be real careful with these guys with these big megaphones that use these words and throw them around,
Right.
because what it does is it dilutes the actual importance of that word and the importance of that term. And so just run around and start calling DEI initiatives racist is very irresponsible. So
Facts.
I'll leave that
I
there.
think we need to make sure Miguel has a Twitter account and then get his reply to Twitter.
Yeah, we will. We're going to ask how to find you guys on. Obviously, Miguel, you mentioned LinkedIn. That's kind of the main platform. We'll be on all
Yep.
the podcast channels. But yeah, I
Yep.
do want to make sure you guys shout that out. So if Jeff, if he doesn't have one, we need to get him enrolled quickly, and we'll be his first 2 followers to see if we can get the a little
I
poke
love
the
it.
bear there. So that's perfect.
It's
Yeah.
it's
No,
it's very tiring to read Bill's response. He write a book,
Yeah.
like every single response.
Yeah.
yeah,
Elon and Mark are like 3 sentences.
My big concern, Jeff, is I don't need Bill spending $1 billion figuring out how to ruin my business.
right. Right. Exactly. That's great. I think Miguel, I love some of the things you shared there. And Jeff, I think this will go in a little bit to you with your background in building kind of the general agency model. In my prior life, responsible for a business, we had nationwide kind of franchises offices across the country on the life and health and retirement side primarily. And we were doing all this research. Gosh, this was I guess 2000 12, 13, somewhere around there. And it was how do we drive growth and diversity in our field channel? And some of the best practices, right? It wasn't about the brochure you had and if it said that you wanted people that look like this or whatever that was. It was more that you were in the community sharing with the people that of the customers that you wanted to represent. and then hiring those people to work with the communities in which you operate. And I think you kind of went there, Miguel. Is I think that's exactly how I think about diversity. Is it's being a good steward in the communities in which you operate and that you want to serve,
Mm-hmm.
and then
Mm-hmm.
representing that within your own workforce. And so I think that's kind of the way that I frame it up as well, or that I think about it. And that was the most successful. Some research was done, right? It wasn't you have a team that's focused on this, or marketing materials that look like this. It was, do you have people that can interact with the other people in the communities? And that was the biggest driver of success for the companies that had the representation that way. Hey everyone, thanks for listening to this episode of Growth and Diversity Podcast. I want to give a shout out to our sponsor, Mostra Coffee. That's MOSTRACOFFEE.com. Go to mostracoffee.com. Check out this woman, minority, veteran, immigrant owned micro coffee roaster out of North County, San Diego. They have amazing coffee. We're addicted to it. We've been drinking it for years in our house, and I hope you get to enjoy it in yours. There's a coupon code as being a part of the Growth and Diversity Podcast listening audience. You can enter Brown Davis 10 and the coupon code once you go to checkout, and you'll receive 10% off. Jeff, when I think about that, talk a little bit about, when you're scaling, building these companies, if we think about DEI, diverse, equity, and inclusion, I'm guessing as an entrepreneur, right, you wear a gazillion hats in those roles. You probably didn't put on the DEI hat that day. It was just in your framework of talent. So talk to a little bit about just that when you're building and scaling. And I mean, going from groups that are, a 2-person operation to hundreds is phenomenal, but just how you kind of thought about attracting talent or looking at talent and building diverse workforces.
One of the things that we always try to really focus on was the Hispanic. I always thought that the insurance industry was missing a golden nugget. Like if you don't staff up language advantage on your team, then you're missing like massive opportunities. So every business that had, if it was anywhere near customer experience, I always want to bring diversity of Spanish component into it because some of the big carrier, like top 5 carriers, if you call over the weekend, they don't even have translators that speak Spanish.
Mm-hmm.
I think AI and where we're going with the bots and AI will solve that a lot of the issues. But for the past 10 years, for example, if you call over at Geico on the weekend, they don't have translator to help you answer claims in Spanish, right? So at the end of the day, our business model is serving people and giving them the best experience. And I always thought that if I can bring the best experience, then I'll have a customer for life.
Miguel, I want to kick it to you a little bit different. So like when I look at your background, strategy, operations,
Mm-hmm.
CIO, and at different companies, I think, global companies, all different sizes and scales. You're in your role now. So you have this, you're advising companies, consulting with companies, this DEI framework. And so how do you kind of think about this DEI framework from for hiring, like in the best interest of the business when you were in those different roles, because you were touching all the tentacles of that
Mm-hmm.
business, not just in a CIO seat, but all of them through your history. So how do you kind of think about that DEI framework when it comes to hiring or building the organizations with people?
Yeah, I want to try to answer this in a couple different ways, but
Mm-hmm.
still try to be succinct. Um, a lot of times when we use the term diversity, we go right to race and ethnicity,
Yeah.
and we forget that there's also diversity of thought.
Yeah.
Yes.
By the way, which is a byproduct of having people who look a little different in a room as well, right? Because we think differently based off of where we grew up. I grew up in the Lower East Side in New York, and so that's going to bring a certain different dynamic to how I think if I'm sitting across a room from somebody who grew up in Des Moines, Iowa, right? So there's going to be there's got to be diversity of thought when you're trying to solve and tackle big problems, right? And so that's where I feel like a lot of this gets lost, and I think where corporate America has done a really good job, and I think I grew up from a leadership perspective at Allstate. I owe a lot of what I know about leadership and about DEI models. I learned that from Allstate, and they put us through a lot of intentional training. And what I've learned to do, because as I said before, I see the results of diverse teams. I have learned to make sure that I'm thinking about making sure that my team thinks differently. And by extension, what that often looks like is it looks different. And I think that, we get lost in this notion that there are these quotas and there's all of these things that are out there. And I think a lot of it, by the way, is kind of it's kind of bunk. I don't know that I've never, ever been trained to hire based on a quota.
Right.
And I've had, my last role, I had 300 people on my team.
Right.
And I've never once thought about it as a quota. But you know what I was trained to do? I was trained to make sure that I had diverse slates of candidates to choose from.
Yep.
And to be very, very critical when I was noticing a certain amount of homogeneity in my slate.
Yep.
And so I was challenged by a boss who, by the way, was a white male, who said, refuse to make a hiring decision until recruiting brings you a diverse candidate slate. And it doesn't mean that I've got to hire a person of color. It doesn't mean I have to hire a woman. It means that I have to have been thinking about what it is that all of that diversity could potentially bring to the table for my team.
Yeah.
And so when I'm trying to solve big problems, I need people who think very, very differently. Men and women think differently. They approach things differently. We just know that. And so is it, when you're trying to solve a big problem, would it not stand a reason to have a woman on your team to help you solve a big problem? So that's where I think, we kind of lose. And by the way, we spend a lot of time talking about the D part.
Yep.
And we don't spend a lot of time talking about the E and the I part,
right,
which, by the way, is a heck of a lot harder to do. It's a lot easier it's very, very easy to make sure you got different colored people in the room. But then how do you ensure that their thoughts are included into your work product? How do you ensure that the way you're treating those people in an equitable fashion across the board? And by the way, equity can be very, very, very difficult. When you think about as a manager, as a hiring manager, you think about the fact that, you've got men on this side who've got families and you've got women on this side who have families. And it's very difficult to sometimes think about how those differences show up in the workplace. And are you treating both of them equitably, given that they have the same family dynamics, but are you treating them equitably? Very, very, very challenging to do. And that's where I think corporate has done a good job in some respects in helping people like me, who, by the way, I'm a diverse person. And I had to learn that I've got my implicit bias. I had to go for my own unconscious bias training to realize that I had biases, even as a person of color, even as a diverse candidate. And how do I bring that to the table to make sure that I can be transparent about my biases, but then I can be aware of them and then see how they impact how I make decisions. And that's what's lost in all of this conversation that Elon wants to get rid of. We want to scrap DEI programs and then not think about all of those things I just mentioned.
Yeah, it's definitely not this too shall pass thing. I think there's so many things in the corporate world, right? We launch and we're like, don't worry, this too shall pass. And it can't, because it's the framework of how companies are developed, right? You don't build buildings without people. You don't build revenue and all these things. Like, there's technology, but there's this human component to it. And no, I totally agree with you. And I love the piece where you went to, when I think about equity, it should be one of the easiest frameworks or pieces to solve. And it hasn't been, because you can put so much easy structure around it.
Sure.
And so it's interesting. I think the world is getting a lot better there. And then, but it's interesting that it took that long. I think inclusion. I love where you went on the thought. Go ahead.
Yeah, can I comment on that piece, on the equity piece? One of the things that I think that has been really instructive for me in my training is to understand that inequity doesn't always come from the oppressor. It sometimes comes from the oppressed. You think about the mental models that we grow up with in society. And I'll give you a very quick example. Mm-hmm. Large insurer, I'm the vice president of a fairly significant area. And I have a lady who is a senior manager who comes to me, and we've got a very trusted relationship. And she says, Miguel, I got approached by another vice president who asked me if I would apply for a director opening in their shop. I'm going to turn it down. I said, why? And she says, well, we're thinking about having another baby. And, and I don't know if I want to take on, that responsibility and then not be able to show up to work and I said, hold on, I've got 4 kids. Do you think ever once in my mind I ever thought that I'm not going to take on more responsibility because that, that somehow I'm not going to be able to show up? No one's asking me to make that choice. Why are you making that choice? You deserve to be a mother and a director just as much as I deserve to be a father and a vice president.
Yeah.
And so you got to break that mental model for people sometimes and help them get over those things. And I pushed her. I wouldn't let her say no. You're going to quit my area. You're going to go take that director job. And then we're going to figure out how to make this thing work. So that's another interesting thing around the equity piece. And by the way, that translates also into salary disparities.
100%.
When you look at how women go into a negotiation, they go in because of mental models. And I'm making a broad generalization,
sure.
so you'll forgive me. But just on the whole, women go into salary negotiations already disadvantaging themselves because that's a mental model that has persisted. And we as leaders have to help them break those models so that we can achieve equity. You can't give me any valid reason why it is that a woman should make less money than a man for a similar job. But yet we see it time and time again. I don't know what it's at now. I think it's like 70 something cents on the dollar or something like that on average. But that there's just no valid reason for that. So we have to help break those models.
No, I think it's great.
What's interesting is we talk about race to start with, and then we went to diversity of thoughts. Let's talk about men versus women, right?
Mhm.
And it's sad that we don't have another lady on this show. We have 3 dudes, right?
Don't worry.
Because
I
she
have
will bring.
lots of future episodes. It's going to be.
That's awesome. This is an interesting story. I just want to tell real quick.
Yeah.
I was chatting with this girl. Let's just call her Kate, right? And super smart, super intelligent. And she came from 2 of the big 5 insurance carrier at very high up, right? And I was like, man, Kate, like, how did you get this position, right? Like, she moved up really, really fast. And then she actually told me, when she got to VP, there was a glass ceiling, right? There's what, VP, EVP, AVP, SVP, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, tell me more. And then she said that, in her circle, she earned her way through, right? Crush everything she did, everything she was given, the box that she was set. But when she realized the next level, that there was a lot of events, corporate events that she wasn't invited to. And I was like, what are those, right? And she was like, all the boys go play golf. I don't play golf. But they didn't invite me. They don't ask me if I play golf. But, the people that continue to hang out on the country clubs,
Mm-hmm.
at the end of the day, like, they bond, they have that bond. And when one
Mhm.
leaves, and then he will push the next buddy, right, into the position that he's leaving to vacate.
Yeah.
And next thing you know, the buddy from country club that played golf with him is getting that role. So, it does. And I just like sat there and digest the story. I was like, I never thought about things like that, right? And at the end of the day, boys can hang with boys, right? Because Miguel's wife not going to be very happy if Miguel hang with 2 girls at the bar or at the country club, and that's just like things we don't, as men, we don't trap ourselves in, right?
Mhm.
But sometimes those bond and relationship are built through outside activities, and as corporate, we encourage outside activity to bond, to strengthen the team. So that's just one of those random things that I want to tell the story, and then whatever discussion come from it.
Yeah.
And a lot of females believe that they can achieve the directors, the VPs, but when you get to the C suites, when you get to like the board members, there's like a lack of diversity there, right? If you look at like the big insurance carrier, the top 20 PNC, whether it's personal line or commercial line, outside a progressive CEO, that's a woman. Like, who else?
Mm-hmm.
And then you look at her compensation plan for probably the most successful personal line insurance carrier right now today, 2024. Look at what she makes versus the other 5. It's like, whoa, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think she's super underpaid for the job that she has done at Progressive. And yeah, like, it get published every year. Nobody ever talk about CEOs in the big insurance companies, but some of the SVPs make more than her. Like, it's crazy. Like, the board
Yeah.
members at Progressive not doing her justice.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's a great point.
I'm gonna tee up kind of. We'll go to one last question. We'll kind of head it off. I definitely think there's another episode in our future of topics that we can discuss. So this has been a real joy. The kind of leave us with your guys' thoughts on the excitement that you have around insurance and insurtech. Right, this is the world that we operate in. It's the only thing that I know. I always tell people that, like, I don't know anything else. I can't. It's insurance. It's my entire
Mm-hmm.
life. So this is all. It's a way we make a living. It's what we love. It's what we're trying to help and serve. Leave us with your parting thoughts. Jeff, we'll start with you, and then Miguel, end with you.
Going first is always so much pressure, and then Miguel come back with so much like profound thoughts and like vocabulary words that he pulled out of Oxford, and I'm like, what?
That's part of my
Right?
strategy. It's part of my strategy.
He's got an
I think
AI bot over there
InsurTech,
that he programmed, just feeding him all kinds of stuff. I think.
Yeah.
yeah, I think InsurTech will do well, when it comes to like growing diversity, because if you look at the demographic of America, what America look like today, right? We had this before the recording, like Miguel's mixed, right? And I am minority and my kids are mixed. And then where America is going is a lot more diverse, a lot more mixed. And just by having younger organizations and you hire demographic in the 20s and 30s, Gen Z, Gen X, just by going that direction, we will have a more a lot more mix of thoughts and community coming together. So I love where we're going, but at the same time, like I worry, can our industry attract talent? Just because
Mm-hmm.
every year there's a new fad, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
there was the cryptocurrency fad, there was SaaS, right? There's AI, there's cyber. Like InsurTech is the tech in the room, but it's not the sexy tech in the room. So where our industry go, it really hugely depends on ability to attract talent, right? How do we convince Shawn Davis of the world? How do you convince the people say, hey, don't take that cyber job, take this InsurTech job, right?
In cyber insurance, right? I mean, I love, like, there's that's what I love, and I think you're exactly right. Like, and that's what I get fired up about is, like, I see the CEOs in Davos, and they're talking about AI and cyber threats and that model. I'm like, there's a direct connection to then what our risk management businesses do to help protect against those innovations and growth. And you need all kinds of people that aren't just traditional insurance folks. And I think, to your point, we got to do a better job of telling that story and attracting, because it is a phenomenal industry, and it's not just numbers on a spreadsheet. And I think that's
Mm-hmm.
just what people think of, right, initially when you think about insurance. Miguel, what are your
Yeah,
thoughts?
I've got a kind of a mixed thought, a little bit of I've got a lot of optimism with a little bit of some kind of caution that I'm looking out for. I tell you, when you go to Vegas to the big conference, and when I walk the show floor, I feel a change.
Mm-hmm.
I see a change. I used to go to a prior show that was the leader before that show was the big one, and it was, you made the comment, Shawn, male, pale, and stale.
Yep.
That was something you brought up in our pre-comments, and now I'm starting to see, particularly from an age perspective, and I think, Jeff, to your point, you're starting to see the insurance professional age, median age probably coming down some now.
Sure.
And I think that's just a natural consequence of the fact that boomers are finally getting out of here, and it's it's a changing of the guard, so to speak. And I think from a population perspective, that population tends to be more diverse. Fantastic. So I think that in and of itself, organically, is going to have a phenomenal impact on where we're going, right? However, on the other side of this thing, there's this cautionary tale. I had a conversation with a person actually just last week that I was interviewing for a position with my firm, and they work currently for one of the big 10 national insurers. And the concept of DEI came up. I said, well, why are you looking for why are you considering leaving? And this gentleman said, he was a male, probably I put him like late 30s. He said, DEI is getting rid of all of us. And I was like, wait, what? And he's like, I have been applying for roles for advancement, and I've been losing opportunities to quote unquote diverse candidates. When I heard that, I literally wanted to cry, because two things. One is, if that's the way DEI is being implemented, it's wrong.
Right.
That's not the purpose and intent of DEI, and that is going to really disserve us in the future.
Right.
But I think more than likely what the challenge is that that we have lost control of the narrative of what DEI actually is and how it's working.
Yep.
And we need to regain control of that narrative with conversations like this so that we can continue to promote the value that it's intended to bring to the table in the ways in which it's supposed to be used. It is not, by virtue of its construction, is not supposed to be discriminatory.
Right.
It's in fact the opposite.
Right.
And so I feel for this very, this kind of passionate, very successful white male who now feels like he is a victim. And that's not his fault. It is the fault of how this has been communicated.
Yep.
Because there should be no victims in the DEI
Right.
game, right?
Great way
And
to
so there's a call to action there. There's a call to action to say, if there are people out there that feel this way, if they feel the way Bill feels, if they feel the way Elon feels, well, then daggone it, Mark, help us communicate. Help us
Right.
communicate what it's supposed to be, right? Let's not just roll over and just say it's racism, it's dead, let's kill it. Let's actually regain control of the narrative and let's start having adult conversations around what we're trying to achieve and the best way to do it. That's my two-pronged view of the future of diversity in insurance.
Love it. Great summary, guys. Thank you for your time. Really enjoyed this conversation. Can't wait to do it again. Again, this is Jeff and Miguel, Shawn Davis here on Growth and Diversity Podcast. Thanks for tuning in today. We look forward to future episodes.